My name is Daniel Harker, and I work as a seasonal backcountry trail technician in Denali National Park. I'm 29 years old, and until today, I thought I understood the rhythms of this place. Its wind patterns, its wildlife, the strange silence that settles over the tundra when the weather shifts. I thought, stupidly, that as long as I respected the terrain and stayed alert, nothing in these mountains could ever surprise me. But what happened this afternoon shattered any confidence I had in my understanding of people. I need to write everything down while it's still fresh, even if my hands won't stop shaking. I started my morning at 7:10 a.m., stepping out of my cabin near the Taklat River camp. The air was crisp enough to sting, and a thin band of fog hung low over the flats. My assignment was straightforward: hike the service trail toward the eastern ridge, check for storm damage, and record debris or washouts. Normally, I wouldn't expect to see another person all day, not counting distant hikers on permitted routes. But around 8:30 a.m., maybe 5 miles in, I found the first sign that the day wouldn't be normal. It was a length of climbing rope. Bright red, cut cleanly at the end. The rope was draped across a low spruce branch like someone had placed it there intentionally. No fraying, no dirt. Fresh. I turned it over in my hands, trying to imagine who the hell would bring climbing rope out here. Denali's interior backcountry isn't exactly frequented by casual adventurers. And the clean cut bothered me. You don't cut rope mid-route unless something's gone wrong. I recorded its GPS location, stored it in my pack, and kept walking. An hour later, the trail narrowed along a slope overlooking a shallow ravine. I noticed footprints, 3 sets. Heavy tread, wide spacing, walking in near-perfect parallel. I crouched beside them, brushing a thin layer of frost from the mud. The tracks were too synchronized to be incidental, and they weren't spaced like casual hikers. More like people walking in formation. People don't walk in formation out here. Military groups, maybe, but no military exercises were scheduled today. I followed them for roughly 3/4 of a mile before something caught my eye to the left. Movement among the alders. I stopped instinctively, letting the silence settle around me. At first, I thought it was a moose, branches shifting slowly, rhythmically, but the motion was too deliberate, too slow. Then I saw a face. A man, maybe late 30s, standing 10 yards off the trail. He wasn't hiding, but he wasn't making his presence known either. He just stood there, head tilted slightly, eyes unfocused. His mouth hung open a little, like he was breathing through it. He wore a tan jacket and dark pants. Nothing unusual, but something about him felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate at first. It was the angle of his neck. Not broken, not grotesque, but bent forward farther than felt natural. Almost like he was trying to look at me from beneath his own eyebrows without moving his eyes. "Morning," I called, keeping my tone level. He didn't respond. Didn't blink. Just kept staring. I took a careful step back. "You okay? Need assistance?" He turned his head. Not his body, just his head, and the movement was too slow. Like his neck resisted the shift, like tendons were catching. When he finally faced forward again, he lifted one hand, palm up, as though offering something invisible. That was when the second man stepped into view. Same posture, same slack jaw, same unnatural tilt. I felt a jolt of cold under my ribs, the kind that doesn't come from weather. "Look, I'm with the Park Service," I said. "If you're lost or injured, I can help you get back to camp." Neither man reacted. Instead, the first one slowly lowered his raised hand, and the two of them moved together, one step to the right, perfectly synchronized. Their boots pressed into the exact parallel tracks I'd been following. I didn't like any of it. I stepped back onto the trail, keeping my breathing even, and without turning my back to them immediately, I began walking backward. The two men watched me go, making no effort to follow, but their heads stayed angled in my direction long after their bodies should have blocked their own line of sight. I didn't fully turn around until I was almost 50 yards away. When I did, they were gone. No tracks leading away from the brush. No sound. Just empty alders swaying lightly in the breeze. I radioed it in, standard protocol when encountering disoriented individuals, but static ate half the transmission. The park's signal dead zones are notorious, so I didn't panic, but I quickened my pace toward the ridge. I wanted higher ground and a clearer connection. By 12:20 p.m., I reached the overlook. The sun had burned away most of the fog, revealing the wide sweep of the valley below. I pulled out my radio again, adjusting frequency, and finally caught a fragment of response. Then the signal cut sharply, not to static, but to silence. Like the unit had shut itself off. Except it hadn't. The screen still glowed. That was when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy, not cautious, deliberate. I turned, expecting maybe one of the rangers from the river camp. It was a woman this time. Same posture. Same forward-tilted neck. Same open mouth. Her eyes were wide, but not scared, blank, like she was looking at something behind me or through me. Her clothes were clean. No sign of struggle or weather exposure. And she wasn't alone. 2 men stepped out behind her. 3 people. Perfectly spaced. Perfectly still. And then they spoke. Not separately. Not conversationally. Together. One sentence in perfect unison. We are the Society of Broken Necks. And we saw you pick up the rope. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard them. The way their voices braided together didn't sound like 3 people speaking. It sounded like one voice stretched across 3 throats. Flat. Perfectly synchronized. No breath between syllables. I didn't move. Not at first. My instinct was to freeze and assess, same as I would with a bear encounter or a charging moose. But the look in their eyes wasn't animal. It wasn't even human fear or aggression. It was vacancy, a kind of mechanical presence that made my spine feel too long. The woman stepped forward, and her knee joints didn't bend right. Too shallow, almost stiff. Her head tilted further, chin nearly to her collarbone, as if she were straining to keep her gaze fixed on me from that impossible angle. I don't want any trouble, I said carefully. If you're part of a group out here, that's fine. But this is restricted trail. I need to... You have what belongs to us, they said again, all 3 mouths moving in perfect time. I realized they weren't looking at me. Not exactly. Their eyes were fixed on a point just above my chest. My pack. The rope. The cut length I'd picked up earlier. It was stupid to feel embarrassed, but the idea flashed through my head anyway. I'd broken some kind of backcountry etiquette, taken something I shouldn't have touched. Maybe they were part of a survivalist group, angry I'd interfered. But that didn't explain the synchronized speech, the strange posture, or the vacant expressions. I found the rope on the trail, I said, keeping my voice level. If it's yours, I'll give it back. No need to. The woman's hand lifted slowly, palm outward, like a traffic stop gesture. Except it wasn't aimed at me. Her palm faced the man to her left. He went still, more still than before. Even his breathing stopped. Her voice came out alone this time, but dull, like someone reading from a cue card. You misunderstand. The rope is not ours. The rope is yours. You chose it. I chose the rope? My pulse thudded against my ribs. I picked it up because it was abandoned. Nothing is abandoned, she said quietly. Only offered. The other 2 nodded in perfect sync. Not jerky nods, slow, deliberate, as though a single command guided all 3 necks. I tried again with my radio, flicking to an emergency frequency behind my leg where they couldn't see. The display stayed lit, but nothing came through. No static. Just blank air. I felt like an idiot for expecting it to work. The air around us felt wrong, too muted, too expectant. Like the natural soundscape had pulled back to give them space. "Look," I said, shifting my stance. "I don't know who you are or what you're doing out here, but I'm leaving. You can follow me to camp if you need help. Otherwise..." The woman took another step forward, and I finally saw it clearly. Her neck wasn't just tilted. It had a slight bend halfway up, like a healed fracture that never lined up right. A soft clicking noise whispered through the air every time she moved it. And then she smiled. Not a wide smile. Not a threatening one. A slow, spreading smile that seemed wrong only because it felt rehearsed. As if she'd seen someone else smile and was imitating the motion without understanding it. "You already joined us," she said. "I think you've got the wrong guy." The smile didn't fade. The clicking in her neck continued faintly as she spoke. "Do you know why we walk this trail? Why we wait in the brush? Why we stand in formation? It is not because we seek company. It is because we notice certain people who break the pattern of the land. People who step where the earth expects silence." "I have official business here," I snapped. "I'm not part of anything." The man on her right tilted his head further than I believed possible, until his left ear nearly touched his shoulder. A faint crack sounded deep inside his throat, like a knuckle popping. His grin widened too, matching hers. "You took the rope," they whispered together. "You chose the sign." My body reacted before my mind decided anything. I backed up toward the ridge trail, keeping them in sight, heart pounding. They didn't move to follow. Not yet. They just watched, necks angled in those impossible positions, breath steady and slow. When I turned and started down the trail, I kept glancing over my shoulder every few steps. They stayed at the overlook, unmoving, until a bend in the trail cut off my view. I tried the radio again. Nothing. I switched every frequency I knew, even the maintenance channels. All silent. By the time I reached the split in the trail, a narrow fork bordered by dwarf birch, it was nearly 1:10 p.m. The air had grown warmer, the sky clearer, but I felt colder than I had all morning. I stopped to catch my breath and looked around. A fresh footprint sat beside my left boot. Not mine. Not shaped like the ones I'd followed earlier. This one was slightly narrower, with a weird pressure point near the heel, like the person had walked on the edge of their foot instead of flat. Another print appeared 3 feet down the trail. Then another. A single trail of footprints, spaced exactly apart, leading deeper into the forest. Not appearing over time. Appearing suddenly, as if someone had just walked through while I was blinking. My mouth went dry. I crouched slowly, examining the nearest print. The edges were crisp. No melt, no sag. It had been made seconds ago. But the trail ahead was empty. No voices. No movement. No wind. I stood up and turned around, and nearly collided with a fourth member of them. A woman about my age, standing inches behind me. Her neck bent far to the right, jaw slack, hair hanging limp over one shoulder. Her eyes were wide and still. She spoke alone, her voice almost gentle. "You weren't supposed to walk this far alone." I stumbled back, hands up, pulse roaring. "I'm going back to camp," I said. "Move." She didn't, but her head rotated slightly, vertebrae clicking with soft, wet pops. "They are already there." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Her mouth formed a small, quiet smile. "You joined. They welcome you." I didn't think. I ran. Not toward the trail I came from. Toward camp. Because if she was telling the truth, I was already too late. I don't remember making the decision to run. 1 second I was staring at that woman's crooked neck in empty gaze, and the next I was sprinting down the trail so fast my boots slid on loose gravel. Branches whipped at my arms. My pack bounced hard against my spine. I didn't care. I just needed distance, needed to hear something that felt normal again. Birds. Anything. But the forest stayed unnervingly quiet. No ravens croaking. No distant crunch of a moose moving through brush. Not even the faint hiss of wind across the ridge. Just the sound of my breathing and the thud of my boots, loud in the stillness. I kept replaying her words as I ran. They are already there. I'd left Taklat River Camp at dawn. There were 5 people scheduled on site today. 2 maintenance staff, 1 ranger, and 2 volunteers prepping gear. If these people, this society, had shown up there, I couldn't let myself fill in the blanks. I ran harder. After 10 minutes, my lungs burned. My vision blurred at the edges. I forced myself to slow to a fast walk, hands on my thighs, sucking in thin mountain air. Denali's elevation wasn't forgiving even on a calm day, and this wasn't calm in any sense. When I looked back down the trail, no one followed. The path behind me was empty. No crooked silhouettes, no whispering voices, no synchronized movements. But the footprint trail was gone. All those crisp prints that had appeared suddenly on the ground behind the 4th woman vanished. The mud was smooth again, untouched. Fresh, even. It made no sense. I pushed forward anyway, refusing to look back again. I knew if I did, I'd start seeing shapes in every shadow. By 2:02 p.m., I reached the long stretch of tundra that overlooked the braided river channels. My legs felt shaky but steady enough to keep moving. The sun hung low behind thin clouds, flattening the light and making everything feel overstated and too bright. I scanned the valley for any sign of movement. A campsite tent, a human silhouette, even a snowshoe hare darting between brush. Nothing. Just an eerie, patient emptiness. I checked my radio again. Still silent. The screen glowed as if mocking me. I switched to the emergency channel one more time. Taklat, do you copy? This is Harker. Respond. Silence. I kept walking. I knew the camp was still more than an hour away on foot, but the distance felt unreasonable now, like the trail was stretching with every step. I'd hiked it more times than I could count, but something about the terrain felt subtly off. Familiar landmarks looked slightly moved, as though someone had rearranged the earth while no one was watching. Halfway down a slope, I froze. A shape stood in the tundra below. At first glance, I thought it was a caribou, tall, broad-shouldered, unmoving. But when I focused on it, the outline sharpened into something unmistakably human. A man, standing completely still, neck angled sharply to one side, facing directly up the slope at me. My heart thudded against my ribs so hard I felt it in my throat. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. Then 2 more figures stepped into view behind him. Not from behind trees, not from brush, from nothing. Just appeared as if they had been there the entire time and I'd only now learned how to see them. All 3 lifted their heads in perfect synchronized motion. The cracking sound, faint but unmistakable, echoed even from that distance, like dozens of tiny twigs snapping. I didn't shout, didn't challenge, didn't even stop to think. I veered off the main trail, cutting toward the riverbed, trampling shrubs and tearing through low brush. It was reckless and stupid. Even in perfect conditions, the braided river area was dangerous, but I'd rather risk twisting an ankle than get within speaking distance of those people again. I scrambled down a rocky slope, boots slipping, both hands grabbing at roots and stones. The ground leveled near a shallow channel of glacial runoff. The water ran cold and fast, but the banks were stable enough to keep me upright. I glanced back toward where the 3 figures had stood. They were gone. Gone. All 3. Not moved. Not walking away. Just vanished. My breath came fast, ragged. I crouched near the river, letting the cold seep through my gloves, trying to ground myself. The rational part of my brain insisted there had to be an explanation. Some shared delusion, some trick of light, dehydration, stress. People don't appear out of nowhere. They don't speak in perfect unison. And they sure as hell don't warp their necks like broken marionettes. But then I felt it. A soft pressure behind me. Like someone had stepped into my personal space without touching. I turned slowly. No one was there. The banks were empty. The trail above was empty. The tundra stretched out wide and unbroken. But the pressure didn't leave. If anything, it moved closer, brushing the back of my neck with a faint cold draft, as though someone was leaning over me. I bolted upright, spinning, fists clenched. Still nothing. But the pressure lifted as if whoever, or whatever, was behind me had withdrawn, losing interest. I backed away from the riverbed and climbed toward the trail again, breath shaking. When I reached the main path, a small object lay in the center of it. The red climbing rope. The exact same length I'd picked up that morning. Laid perfectly coiled. But I hadn't dropped it. I checked my pack with trembling hands. The rope was still inside, buried under my lunch kit and GPS. I pulled it out just to be sure. Same cut end. Same color. 2 identical ropes. One in my hand. One placed on the trail ahead of me. A faint whisper drifted over the tundra. Not carried by wind, there was no wind. It sounded like voices speaking from far away, but close enough to feel in my chest rather than hear with my ears. 3 voices, repeating one phrase. You walked the pattern. Footsteps crunched on the tundra behind me. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I didn't turn around. I ran again, because ahead, half a mile down, perched against the ridge like a tiny outpost in a monstrous wilderness, was Taklat River Camp. Except something was wrong. Smoke rose from it. Not the thin smoke of a cook fire. Thick, like something had burned. Like I was already too late. The smoke rising from Taklat River Camp didn't billow. It pulsed. It rose in slow, spaced bursts, as if whatever was burning wasn't quite committed to catching fire. That made it worse somehow. A full blaze would have been straightforward. A stove accident, a cabin spark, something mundane. But this kind of smoke looked intentional, or controlled. I pushed my legs harder, cutting across the tundra instead of following the switchback trail. The ground was uneven, dotted with low shrubs and pockets of mud, but adrenaline made me reckless. I needed line of sight. I needed to know what the hell had happened. The closer I got, the more I realized how quiet everything remained. No shouting. No radio chatter. No movement. Not even the metallic clatter of equipment in the wind. The air felt thick heavy, like the quiet wasn't natural but imposed. I slowed when I reached the dirt access road leading into camp. My chest burned, and my breath came too fast, but I forced myself to move carefully now. Whatever waited inside, running headlong into it wouldn't help. The camp was small, 2 bunk cabins, a tool shed, a mess hut, and a vehicle bay. Usually lively with crew chatter and the hum of generators. Now it looked hollowed out, like someone had drained all the color from it. As I stepped into the camp's center clearing, my boots crunched on something brittle. I froze. It was broken glass. A thin scattering of it across the dirt, glittering like frost. Not from a shattered window. This glass was amber-tinted, the kind used for lanterns. But our lanterns weren't outside today. A faint hiss reached my ears from behind the mess hut. Then a soft crack. Then silence again. I edged toward the sound, keeping low beside the bunk cabin. My hands shook, but my body stayed on autopilot. The same instinct that gets you through bear encounters, storms, whatever the wilderness throws your way. Except this wasn't the wilderness. When I rounded the corner, I saw something I still wish I hadn't. A lantern lay on the ground, its metal frame bent and twisted like someone had crushed it with bare hands. The glass globe was split in half, edges sharp. Next to it, scattered in a perfect circle around the lantern, were footprints. Human. All facing inward, as if a ring of people had stood around the lantern and watched it die. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to scan for movement. That was when I noticed the door of the mess hut. It was open, just slightly, a crack wide enough for a shadow to slip through. I approached slowly, trying not to breathe too loudly. Inside the hut, the air felt warmer, thicker. The faint smell of burnt oil lingered, mixing with something else, something like old wood soaked in mildew. The door's hinges creaked softly when I pushed it open. I stepped inside and stopped. The entire center of the mess hut floor was covered in rope. Not just one or two lengths, dozens, all coiled in identical spirals, each one precisely aligned like a pattern someone had practiced over and over. Red ropes, yellow ropes, weathered ropes, fresh ones, all cut to equal lengths, all perfectly arranged. My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. This wasn't a sign of a struggle. This wasn't gear storage. It looked like a ritual, something performed with intention and precision, something meant to be seen. A shadow flickered near the hut's far wall. I jerked my head up. A figure stood there, too still, neck bent sharply to the left, chin nearly touching collarbone. He stepped forward, and the dim light revealed his face. I recognized him. Patrick, with the maintenance crew. A quiet guy, slept in the second bunk cabin. We'd eaten breakfast together 2 days ago. He'd laughed about a wolverine stealing one of his gloves. But Patrick didn't laugh now. He didn't speak. His mouth hung open, breath slow, eyes wide and unfocused. His neck bent at that same horrifying angle, like it had been dislocated and forced to heal wrong overnight. "Patrick," I whispered. Hey, look at me. Are you hurt?" He took a step forward. His foot pressed directly into one of the coiled ropes on the floor without disturbing its shape, as if his weight meant nothing, as if he wasn't fully present. When he spoke, his voice was too soft, too empty. "You walked the pattern." My stomach clenched. "Patrick, where's everyone else? Where's Tessa? Where's Mark?" He didn't answer. Or maybe he couldn't. Instead, his head rotated slowly back to center with a sickening crack pop-pop, each vertebra shifting like puzzle pieces trying to remember their correct position. Then he lifted his arm. Behind me, the door creaked open wider. I spun. 3 more figures stepped into the mess hut. 2 men, 1 woman, all with broken, angled necks, all walking in perfect rhythm, all barefoot on the rope-covered floor without disturbing a single coil. I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall. Patrick stepped closer, his eyes fixed somewhere slightly above my face, like he was trying to watch my thoughts instead of my body. The woman spoke first. Her voice matched the rhythm of the other 3 breathing behind her, like 4 metronomes ticking in unison. "You chose the rope." The man beside her followed, continuing the sentence as if picking up a scripted line. "You stepped on the trail." The next man continued. "You broke the silence." And Patrick, standing inches from me now, finished the line. "So now you belong to us." I grabbed the nearest object, a metal chair, and swung it hard. It hit Patrick's shoulder, but instead of recoiling, his neck jerked back violently, like a marionette yanked by unseen strings. His jaw snapped shut so hard I heard his teeth clack. That gave me the only chance I was likely to get. I bolted through the door, shoving past the 3 in the entrance. Their hands brushed my arms, their fingers cold and soft like damp leaves. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe. I just ran. Across the clearing, past the cabins, toward the tool shed, because the tool shed had a lockable door, thicker structure, and maybe, just maybe, a landline inside. But halfway there, I stopped dead. The shed door was already open, swinging gently, like someone was waiting inside. And then, from behind me, 4 slow, synchronized footsteps, one after another, closing in. I didn't want to turn around. My legs wanted to run, my lungs wanted to scream, but something colder, some deep, primitive instinct, held me still. Those 4 synchronized footsteps didn't sound like a person approaching. They sounded like a countdown. Slow, deliberate, patient. Almost ceremonial. The tool shed hung open in front of me, its door nudged by a faint breeze that shouldn't exist in such still air. The interior was dark. Too dark. Even with the midday light behind me, the inside felt like a swallowed space, something that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. A 5th footstep sounded behind me. That forced me to move. I lunged toward the shed, grabbed the metal door, and slammed it shut behind me with all my weight. The latch clicked into place, my hands fumbling to shove the rusted bolt across. It screeched loudly, but it held. Then the shed went silent. I stood there, back pressed against the door, heart pounding so hard my ribs hurt. For a moment, I braced myself for the door to rattle, for fists to pound against the metal panel, for voices to whisper through the cracks. Nothing. Just the thick, stale air of the shed and the faint smell of oil, old dirt, and rope fibers. I took a shaky breath and turned slowly. The shed wasn't empty. Tools hung neatly on the walls. Saws, mallets, coils of utility rope, the usual gear. But something was off. The tools weren't arranged in their usual chaotic, practical order. They were aligned with strange precision, spacing measured, angles exact. The mallets all tilted 3 degrees to the right. The saw handles faced inward. The utility ropes weren't coiled randomly but folded in identical lengths, stacked like pages in a book. A whisper of panic crawled up my spine. Someone had been in here long before I arrived. Someone with a pattern. I forced myself to scan the room. A radio unit sat on the far wall, mounted above a battery bank used when the generator failed. My chest tightened with hope. A landline wasn't available here. Taklat wasn't that kind of outpost, but a hardwired radio often picked up signals even when handheld units didn't. I approached it cautiously, as if any sudden movement might wake the unnatural quiet clinging to the shed. The radio's power switch was on. The frequency dial, however, had been turned to a dead band. A blank, unmonitored slice of spectrum where not even static lived. That wasn't normal. Even empty frequencies buzzed slightly. I adjusted it carefully. No sound. I switched bands. Nothing. I flipped to emergency channels. Silence. Not broken. Not static. Absolute, suffocating silence. Like the antenna wasn't connected to the sky anymore. My throat tightened. I backed away from the radio and wiped my palms on my pants. The shed felt smaller by the second. That was when I noticed the rope. Not the spools on the shelf. Not the utility coils on the wall. A single rope, identical to the red one in my pack, sat carefully placed on the floor by the far corner. Cut cleanly, perfectly coiled, and placed directly in front of the only window. The window faced the clearing outside. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I stepped closer, heart hammering in my ears, and rose onto my toes to peer through the dusty glass. 4 figures stood in the clearing, not moving, necks bent, all facing the shed. Their eyes, God, their eyes, weren't focused on the building itself. They were angled slightly upward, staring directly at the level of the window. Exactly where my head was. A jolt of pure, physical terror shot through me. I stumbled backward, bumping into the tool bench. The rope beside the window shifted slightly. Only an inch. A A subtle slide across the floor, as if someone had tugged it gently from outside. I froze. The shed door behind me gave a soft metallic tick, the sound of pressure touching it from the outside. Not enough to open it, just testing it. Another tick, then another. 3 light touches, perfectly spaced. I pressed both hands against the inside of the door, muscles shaking. I didn't know what they wanted. I didn't know why they kept repeating the same phrase about patterns and choices. I didn't know why they followed trails and left ropes like breadcrumbs. But I knew one thing clearly now. They weren't trying to break in. They were waiting for me to make the next move. I stepped back from the door. My breaths came too fast, too shallow. I tried to focus, anything to keep my mind from spiraling. The shed wasn't big. There had to be something useful here. A flare, a bear deterrent kit, a tool sharp enough to act as a weapon. My eyes landed on a metal pry bar hanging on the wall. Heavy, solid, 2-foot length. I grabbed it with both hands. Its weight grounded me slightly. Then the window dimmed, like a shadow had passed over it. I turned slowly. One of them stood at the window now. Close. Too close. Only inches from the glass. His face hovered in the center of the pane, eyes level with mine. But he wasn't breathing fog onto it. His breath didn't fog the glass at all. His chest barely moved. His mouth hung open slightly, as if stuck between words. His neck bent forward with a long, slow creak, vertebrae clicking one after another like dominoes. His lips moved, and in the faintest whisper, muffled by the pain, I heard the sentence again. You walk the pattern. I lifted the pry bar, gripping it like a lifeline. But he didn't break the glass. He didn't try to come in. Instead, he lifted his arm and pointed toward the back of the shed. A chill ran down my arms. Turned and saw what he was pointing at. A hatch. Metal. Set into the floor, camouflaged by dust and tool clutter. I'd never noticed it before, not in all the months I'd used this shed. It looked old. Older than the building itself. Scratched into its surface, barely visible, was a single symbol. A spiral. Just like the rope patterns. The whisper outside came again, louder now. You chose the rope. A second whisper joined it. You stepped on the trail. A third. You broke the silence. And then a fourth voice, one I recognized. Patrick's. So now you descend. The hatch rattled softly. From underneath. Like something inside wanted me to open it. I backed away until the wall hit my shoulders. But the shed was too small. And the 4 shadows outside began to gather around the window and door, waiting for me to decide which direction I'd go. The shed felt smaller with every breath I drew. The shadows outside weren't moving closer, but somehow that made everything worse. They weren't trying to get in. They were waiting for me to choose. I didn't want to go near that hatch. Every instinct I had screamed against it, but the door and window were blocked by 4 silent figures with necks bent like snapped branches. The pry bar felt too light in my hands now, like a toy pretending to be a tool. The hatch rattled again. Not violently. Not like something trapped was pounding on it. No, this was softer. A gentle shuffle, a brushing sound, like someone dragging fingertips across metal from underneath. I felt the vibration through the soles of my boots. My throat tightened. I needed to think. I forced myself to take a slow breath, scanning the shed for another way out. There wasn't much. A locked supply locker, a wall of tools, the window blocked by a face I refused to look at again, and the main door, a door I knew wouldn't hold if they actually wanted it open. My eyes fell on the ventilation grate near the ceiling. Too small for a person. Too high to reach. Useless. I gripped the pry bar tighter, jaw clenched. Think, Daniel, I whispered to myself. Think. But every time I tried to form a plan, Another faint scraping rose from beneath the hatch. Then a voice. So, Charlotte. A whisper that seemed to come through the metal floor itself. Daniel. My blood turned to ice. No one inside this park, no coworker, no ranger, no volunteer, had a voice like that. It wasn't anyone I knew. It wasn't any voice a grown adult could produce. Daniel, it whispered again, this time a breathy sing-song, like someone practicing the shape of the name rather than speaking it. I stepped back instinctively. My heel hit a toolbox, metal clattering loudly in the cramped space. Outside, the figures didn't react. Not a twitch. Not a turn of the head. Their patience was absolute. Inside, the air felt warm, uncomfortably so. Almost humid. A faint scent rose from the hatch, something like stale earth mixed with old rope fibers. I didn't want to look at it, but I forced myself to crouch enough to peer at the spiral scratched into its surface. Up close, the grooves were deeper than they'd looked from across the room. Jagged, uneven, like someone carved it aggressively. There were faint drag marks around the edges of the hatch too, tiny scratches leading outward, as if it had been opened or moved repeatedly. The whisper came again. Come down. 2 simple words. Too soft to belong to anyone capable of snapping necks into unnatural angles. Too deliberate to be random sound. Another whisper followed. A different voice. Older. Breathier. We've been waiting. I stumbled back again, heart pounding so hard I thought I might faint. My shoulder bumped a hanging mallet, and it swung slightly, casting a small shadow across the wall. And that's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. A second spiral. Tiny. Scratched into the wall beside the mallet's hook, so faint it was almost invisible unless the light hit just right. And then another on the opposite wall. And another on the wooden beam above the radio. Dozens. All hidden. All almost invisible unless you were looking for them. This shed, this place I'd worked in for months, had been marked long before today. A sound snapped my attention back to the hatch. A click, followed by a long, slow metal groan. The hatch lock was turning. From the inside. No. No, no, I whispered, backing toward the door again even though I knew 4 bent-neck silhouettes stood waiting outside. The bolt on the hatch rotated another notch. Then another. I rushed forward and slammed the pry bar down onto the hatch lock. It rang with a sharp ding, but the bar bounced off like I'd struck concrete. The hatch didn't even dent. The whispering beneath stopped abruptly. Silence pressed in, tighter than before. 3 knocks. So, measured. From beneath my feet. I staggered back. The figures outside shifted slightly, just an inch, maybe 2, as if listening. A voice outside spoke, muffled through the metal siding but unmistakable. Patrick, you're being called. My stomach clenched. Patrick, I shouted through the door. If you can hear me, if you're still in there, listen to me. Fight this. Come inside. We can get help. Silence. Then his answer, almost gentle. You're already with us. I slammed my palm against the door. I'm not part of anything. Outside, for heads tilted in unison, slow, creaking motions. Their shadows stretched across the ground, long and unnatural in the flattening afternoon light. The hatch behind me clicked again. The lock finished turning. A soft hiss followed, as if air escaped from a sealed chamber. My breath caught in my throat. I turned slowly. The hatch lid rose a fraction of an inch, too smoothly, like something beneath was lifting it with careful, practiced strength. A thin line of darkness appeared around the edges. Not the darkness of lack of light, something thicker, heavier, the kind of darkness that feels deep. My fingers tightened painfully on the pry bar. The voice from the darkness whispered one word. Join. I took a step back. Then another. But the shed's rear wall was close, and the door was blocked. The hatch lid rose another inch. The smell hit me next, old dirt, mildew, something metallic beneath it. A scent that felt wrong for anything underground in Denali. Then, I swear this on everything, the darkness inside shifted, like something was moving just out of sight. I pressed my back against the wall, breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. Every possible escape route collapsed in my mind. Door blocked. Window blocked. Vent too small. Walls solid. Tools useless. The hatch lifted fully. A cold draft rolled out. And then, a hand emerged. Thin. Fingers elongated. Each joint bending at angles no human finger should manage. The skin looked stretched, almost translucent. The hand felt along the floorboards. Searching. Reaching. For me. Outside, for voices murmured together. You descend. The hand grasped the edge of the hatch and began to pull its body upward. I did the only thing left. I screamed, and the shed answered. Something inside it moved. My scream didn't echo inside the shed. It felt swallowed, absorbed by the same oppressive silence that had been thickening around me all day. The thing climbing out of the hatch paused at the sound, its pale hand tightening its grip on the floorboards with slow, deliberate pressure, like the scream was something it wanted to feel through its fingertips. I pressed myself harder against the wall, the pry bar slipping a little in my sweating hands. My breath came in sharp, rapid gulps, but each inhale felt thin, like the shed was running out of air. The hand moved again. This time, it wasn't feeling blindly. It was pushing, lifting something up. A second hand appeared, gripping the opposite edge of the hatch. These fingers were bent in different wrong ways, as if they had been broken and healed without ever being set properly. Then came the sound, a soft, wet cracking, like cartilage bending too far. A next sound. My stomach lurched. A head rose through the hatch. Not fast. Slowly. Carefully. The face was that of a woman, but not like the other members of this society. Her neck wasn't merely angled. It was twisted almost fully backward, chin resting against her shoulder, eyes looking up at the ceiling while her body climbed forward. Her mouth hung open a little, lips trembling as if she were trying to form words she no longer remembered how to speak. She pulled herself higher until her shoulders cleared the floor. Her body... It didn't move like a body. Her arms didn't coordinate with her torso. Everything seemed disconnected, like she was assembling herself piece by piece. Behind me, outside the shed, I heard the crunch of snow and soil. 4 synchronized footsteps. The watchers were moving. I forced myself to keep my eyes on the woman emerging from the hatch. Her arms trembled as she pushed up, and then, suddenly, her head snapped forward into a normal position with a violent, bone-deep crack that made my legs almost give out. Her eyes shifted. They found me. Unblinking. Empty. Her lips parted. You answered, she whispered, but the sound didn't match the movement of her mouth. It was like the voice came from somewhere deeper than her throat, from the air inside the hatch itself. I didn't answer anything, I choked out. Her jaw clicked softly as she tilted her head, movements jerky, puppet-like. You walked where the land waited. I don't know what that means. Her fingers tightened on the floorboards, tendons stretching under her pale skin. You saw the sign. The rope. The coiled, cut rope. She dragged herself another inch upward, her arms shaking like they barely belonged to her. Her head twitched in small, unnatural motions, eyes locked onto mine. I could smell the earth on her now. Wrong. I needed out. I didn't care if 4 of them waited outside. Anything was better than being cornered in here with whatever was rising from the hatch. I bolted toward the door. It didn't move. It wasn't locked. It wasn't barred. It just didn't move. Something heavy pressed against the other side. Not pushing, not pounding, just leaning, breathing. I stepped back from the door, heart racing. The window was blocked, a silhouette standing inches away. No escape there either. The only open space was behind me. The hatch. The woman had fully pulled herself onto the shed floor now. She stood shakily, her knees bending in odd, shallow angles. She straightened slowly, vertebrae stacking with audible cracks until her full height was revealed. She wasn't tall, but something about her felt impossibly large. Like her presence filled all the space the four outside didn't claim. I lifted the pry bar in a trembling hand. It felt like nothing. She took a single step toward me. Her ankle bent sideways with a sharp crack but didn't slow her down. Another step. Her gaze didn't waver. Not even a blink. "Stop," I said, voice breaking, brandishing the pry bar like a drowning man waving a stick at the ocean. "Don't come closer." Her eyes widened slightly. Then she spoke again, but this time her voice matched the movement of her lips. A fragile, human cadence. "You have to go down, Daniel." That froze the breath in my chest. "No," I whispered. "I'm not going down there. You already started the descent." I shook my head hard. "I haven't touched the hatch, I haven't." "You screamed," she whispered. "What does that?" "You broke the silence. The land heard you." Behind her, the hatch yawned open like a mouth, darkness thick inside it. Something shifted in that darkness. Something alive. I stepped sideways, trying to put the tool bench between us. She followed, not fast, not aggressive, but relentlessly, like a shadow tracking a light source. The footsteps outside grew louder. For pairs. Steady. Slow. Synchronizing with her movements. Not rushing. Not threatening. Waiting. I backed into the far corner of the shed, breathing too fast, gripping the pry bar so hard my knuckles hurt. The woman reached the center of the room. She tilted her head at a sharp angle, another bone-deep crack. Her voice softened. "Go down." "No," I whispered. "You must." "No." Her eyes narrowed slowly, like she was trying to understand human fear. "You don't understand the pattern," she whispered. "You stepped into it without seeing. We waited. We watched. We offered rope. You accepted. You screamed. You broke the last quiet walk." I shook my head violently. "I didn't join anything. You joined when you noticed us." My heart stopped for a second. "That's all it takes," she whispered. Her foot lifted. She took one more step toward me, and the darkness in the hatch suddenly surged upward, a shape rising fast. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I rammed my shoulder into the back wall of the shed. It didn't give. I rammed again, and the wall did something a shed wall should never do. Flexed, like thin metal under pressure. It bowed outward under my weight. Behind me, the woman lunged. I threw everything I had into one more shove. The wall split. Cold air exploded in, and I fell backward, out of the shed, as hands, hers or something else's, clawed at the air inches from my face. Cold air hit me so hard it felt like getting punched in the lungs. I landed on my side in the dirt behind the shed, the wind knocked out of me, the world spinning. Splinters of plywood scattered around me, the wall hanging open like a peeled skin. For a second I saw nothing but sky and the jagged silhouette of the torn building. A hand shot through the opening. Not the pale woman's. Something else. Something longer. Too thin. Fingers like white branches that bent at hinges instead of joints. They clawed at the air where my face had been a half-second earlier. I scrambled back on my elbows, boots digging into the ground. My spine slammed against the side of the generator shack. The shed opening warped in my vision, shadows shifting inside like something moving just behind the frame. The pale woman didn't crawl through. She didn't try. She just watched me. Her head angled sideways through the broken panel, her face half lit by the afternoon sun. Her eyes were calm, almost peaceful, and somehow that was more horrifying than if she'd been screaming. "You shouldn't have left," she whispered. I choked on a breath, shoving myself upright. "Stay away from me." "You broke the wall," she said softly. "The pattern moves now." Behind her, that thing in the hatch, the two long fingers, scraped the floor again, searching for a path out. I didn't wait to see more. I sprinted. Not through the clearing. Not toward the camp buildings. Toward the tree line. I didn't know if the forest was safer, but anywhere was safer than being boxed in between structures with nowhere to run. The ground sloped upward toward a rocky outcrop. I scrambled up it, boots slipping on loose stones, breath ragged. Halfway up, something in the clearing caught my eye. 4 figures. The same 4 bent-neck watchers. They had repositioned, not slowly, not step by step, but suddenly. One moment they were beside the shed. The next they were standing in a wide arc between me and the rest of camp. Their heads angled at identical degrees, staring straight at me as I climbed. Not once had I seen them move. Not once. But they were always where they needed to be. "Get away from me!" I shouted, though my voice came out broken and thin. None of them reacted. They simply watched. I reached the top of the outcrop and nearly collapsed. My legs trembled violently. My lungs burned. My mind felt like it was vibrating inside my skull. From this height I could see the whole camp. Smoke drifted lazily from somewhere behind the mess hut, thick but controlled. Not destructive. Not wild. Purposeful. The shed's broken wall looked small from here, but the opening seemed darker than it should be, like a shadow clung to it, refusing to leave. The woman I had escaped from stepped out of the shed. She didn't walk. She glided. Her feet moved, yes, but her body didn't bounce or shift with each step. She moved like someone was pulling her forward with invisible strings. When she reached the 4 watchers, they parted slightly to make space for her. Not respectful space, patterned space. As if she belonged dead center. She lifted her face toward me. Even from 50 yards away, I felt the weight of her stare settle over me like a hand around my throat. "You can't hide," she said, barely loud enough for the words to carry. "The land remembers the way you walk." My stomach twisted. I backed away from the edge of the outcrop and nearly fell again as my boot brushed against something unnatural on the ground behind me. I spun around. A rope. Not coiled. Not arranged. Straight. Laid out perfectly, end to end, forming a single line that pointed deeper into the forest. A direction. A path. My heart hammered against my ribs. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no, no." Because I realized something then. Every rope I'd found today, every cut piece, every coil, every length left in impossible places, they weren't random offerings. They were instructions. A trail. A pattern I had walked without meaning to. And this rope? Laid straight, not coiled? It wasn't an offering. It was a command. Behind me, the watchers shifted again. Not by stepping, not by turning, but by simply being closer when I blinked. Only 10 yards below the outcrop now. The woman's head bent sharply to the right with a sound like cracking branches. "You must follow," she said. "It is the only path that remains for you. I'm not going anywhere with you." I shouted, voice cracking. "You already did," she replied. And God help me, something in that sentence, something about the awful certainty in her voice, made my knees shake so hard I had to brace myself on a rock. Because she was right. I had already walked their path. I was deep inside their pattern, like a fly realizing too late that the web wasn't accidental. The rope at my feet stretched deeper into the forest, toward a narrow cut between trees, a darker part of the woods where light barely reached. My body screamed not to follow. My mind screamed not to follow. But the watchers were rising up the outcrop now. Slow, steady, in perfect synchrony. That impossible glide that never seemed to disturb their breathing. I backed away until my heels touched the rope. And then the forest behind me moved. Not an animal. Not a person. Something deeper. A soft bending of the dark tree-line, as if something tall had shifted its weight from one foot to the other, waiting. Waiting for me. The woman below spread her arms a fraction. "You descended," she said softly. "Now you approach." "I'm not going with you," I breathed. Her head tilted the opposite direction now, another crunching shift of vertebrae. "You already are." The ground trembled faintly beneath me. The rope twitched. I realized then, truly, horribly, that if I didn't follow that rope, they wouldn't drag me back. They would push me forward, into whatever waited beyond the trees. I stepped back from the watchers, back from the outcrop edge, back onto the rope. It felt warm under my boot, as if it had been lying in sunlight even though the path ahead was dark. My breath shuddered out of me. I turned toward the forest, toward the rope's direction, and I stepped into the trees. Behind me, all 5 voices whispered, "Good." The woods swallowed the sound. And me. The forest swallowed me with a silence so heavy it felt physical, like walking into deep water. The rope stretched ahead of me in a straight line, cutting through underbrush that somehow didn't snag or move around it. It lay perfectly flat, warm under my boots, as if guiding me somewhere it had been waiting to reveal. The light dimmed the farther I walked. The trees closed ranks overhead, branches knitting into a ceiling that filtered out the afternoon sun. I tried to slow my breathing. My heart felt like it was pumping tar instead of blood. Behind me, I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't have to. I knew the watchers were following. Not rushing. Not chasing. Just closing the space between us with the same slow, deliberate inevitability as a rising tide. "Keep walking," a voice murmured from the trees to my left. I flinched, whip turning toward the sound. No one there. But the rope tugged slightly forward. Not enough to pull me, not enough to trip me, just a suggestion. A reminder. I kept moving. Every few steps, shadows shifted in the trees. Not shapes. Not movement. Just the sense that something was adjusting its position each time I blinked. The forest no longer felt like a place. It felt like a hallway with no walls, funneling me deeper. The rope angled right, into a narrow split between 2 spruce trees so close together I had to turn sideways to squeeze through. Past them, the ground dipped sharply into a hollow filled with dense moss. My boots sank slightly with each step. The quiet grew thicker. My ears began to ring. I'm not sure how long I followed that rope. Time felt syrupy, stretched. The forest air cooled until every breath felt like inhaling gravel dust. My hands shook so hard I had to clench them into fists. At some point I realized something that made my stomach drop. I couldn't hear the camp anymore. No wind. No distant river. No crackle of the generator. Just the steady, faint thump of my own pulse and the soft crunch of moss underfoot. And then, the rope ended. Abruptly. It didn't taper. It didn't fray. It just stopped at the base of a massive spruce whose trunk was so wide it would take 5 people to encircle it. A spiral was carved into the bark. Deeper, jagged, as if the tool that carved it had been vibrating uncontrollably. My pulse hammered against my ribs. "I followed your rope," I whispered, voice trembling. "I did what you wanted. Just tell me what you want now." The forest didn't answer, but something behind me did. 5 sets of footsteps. Slow, rhythmic, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. I turned. The pale woman stood closest, her head angled in that unnatural tilt, her eyes bright in the half-dark like an animal's. Behind her came the four watchers, their necks bent at distinct angles, their expressions blank and calm. They didn't surround me. They didn't reach for me. They simply stopped a few yards away, blocking the way back. "You've reached the end of the walk," the woman whispered. "Now begins the descent." "I didn't go down the hatch," I said, voice breaking. She blinked slowly. "You didn't need to. You brought the descent with you." My mouth went dry. "I don't understand." "You will," she said, "when you listen." She lifted her arm with a slow, trembling motion and pointed at the base of the spruce. At the spiral, the moss around the trunk began to shift. At first it looked like the wind stirring it, then like animals tunneling beneath it. A hand rose from the moss. Thin. Its fingers bent wrong, just like the ones from the hatch. Another hand appeared beside it. Then a head. A man's head this time. Eyes open, blinking slowly against the dim light. His neck hung at a slanted angle that made nausea twist up my throat. He pulled himself upward with agonizing slowness, moss clinging to his clothes, his fingers digging into the soil. Behind him came another figure, and another, 3 in total, rising from beneath the roots of the spruce. Not climbing, not crawling, emerging, like they had been waiting underground for someone to call them. "No," I whispered. "No, no, what is this? What are they?" The pale woman lowered her hand. Her eyes softened. "They're the ones who walked before you." "I'm not joining this," I said, backing up until my shoulders hit a tree trunk. "I'm not part of your group. I'm not." "You already joined," she murmured. "The moment you look back. The moment you noticed the rope. The moment you stepped through the silence." The 3 figures freshly risen from the roots turned their heads toward me. Vertebrae cracked loudly, echoing among the trees. I gripped the pry bar so tightly it dug into my palm. The woman smiled faintly. "You were chosen because you walk wrong." What? What is that even?" "You hesitate at crossroads," she said. "You pause where others rush. You listen to the land instead of trampling it. The land sees you. The pattern saw you." I shook my head violently. I was doing my job. "You were walking the pattern," she repeated, her tone almost tender. "And we only come for those who already belong." The 3 new figures took slow, synchronized steps toward me. The watchers behind the woman mirrored them. 7 in total now, all moving with quiet, reverent purpose. Panic surged up my throat. I bolted to the left. Branches whipped my face, and the moss gave way under my feet, but the forest around me warped. Not physically, not suddenly, but paths that should have existed tilted into dead ends. Gaps between trees tightened like shifting walls. The rope's direction was the only open path. The only path the forest allowed. I stumbled back toward the clearing at the spruce, panting so hard I tasted blood. The spiral on the bark seemed deeper now. The pale woman stepped closer. "Your descent begins where all patterns converge," she whispered. "Where the land bends." "I'm not going with you," I whispered. "You already are." She extended her hand. I raised the pry bar. But the ground beneath me suddenly softened, like the moss turned liquid. My boot sank, then my other. Before I could react, the earth beneath me collapsed. Not a hole, not a pit, the fold. Like the forest floor had opened a crease and let me slip into it. The last thing I saw before I fell was the woman's face above me, her neck perfectly straight for the first time all day. She whispered, "Welcome." Then the earth closed, and the world went dark.